Welcome to our special town council meeting. And if you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. So, Melanie, roll call.
Roll call. Councilmember Bolin is absent. Councilmember Colleton.
Here.
Councilmember Lang. Here. Councilmember Lasan.
Here.
And Mayor Crowder.
Here. Okay. Item 2A1, consider concurring with staff's recommendation to accept the basis of the design report prepared and submitted by Carola. And Mark, are you going to speak on this?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mayor Crowder. Good afternoon, Council. Thank you so much for the time and the community showing up today for a very special Town Council meeting discussing the Paradise Sewer Project. So I'm going to go ahead and just give a brief overview of the meeting. We do have quite a lot of information to digest, which is the purpose of this special meeting, rather than to try and fit it in between the other normal town business. So with that, here is an agenda. We'll go through the background, basis of design report that was just previously mentioned. We'll be talking about the project cost updates, our funding pursuits, a potential revised project kind of preview, as well as a discussion of the sewer committee. And due to the length of the presentation, we are just going to ask that questions remain for the end from the council and then the community alike. So with that, I'll go ahead and give some brief introductions. Again, my name is Mark Maddox. I'm the Public Works Director and Town Engineer for the Town of Paradise. Joining me today is Colin Nelson, our Capital Projects Manager for the sewer project for the town, as well as to my right, Guy Voss with HDR. He is our Town of Paradise Owner's Agent. Allison McReynolds with HDR is also here. She's our Deputy Owner's Agent. Randy Buckman with our Progressive Design Build team. He represents Mountain Cascade Incorporated. He is our Design Build Project Manager. Beverly Hahn is also here today with our Progressive Design Build Carollo Design Deputy Project Manager. And then Darren Bond is also with Carollo. He's our Design Engineer and has a specialty in the collection system for the Town of Paradise for our project. Also online today we have Clint Snyder. He is the Assistant Executive Officer for the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. Clint's joining us remotely, and there's a little moment here in the presentation for him to give some input to the current status of the project and moving forward. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and get started. So at the December 10th council meeting, we provided this slide kind of showing really the last 12 years, 15 years of project development activities, kind of bringing us to this 2025 basis of design report. But for the purposes of kind of introducing today's presentation, I'm going to spend some time on what brought us to this moment in advance of hiring our PDB team and preparing the BODR. So with that, for numerous years, I would say we've been showing this slide to our funding partners, project stakeholders, City of Chico, Butte-Lafco, Butte County, really to showcase just how studied and how important this project is to the Town of Paradise. For the greater part of the last 40 years, this has been our most important project in the Town of Paradise. So some key definitions, so we're all talking the same language. The Paradise Sewer Project is overall goal is to provide a long-term solution for the collection, treatment, and dispersal of wastewater from parcels identified in the sewer service area. And that sewer service area is kind of described here by pretty much areas encompassed by Clark Road, Skyway, and Pearson Road, kind of mapped to the right here in orange. So you'll see some of the formatting on this slide represents kind of different themes that PowerPoint seems to offer, but I kind of show that here to highlight is that some of these are actually direct from previous presentations at different moments in time in the project history. This one in particular is from 2017, when at a community hearing, I believe, to potentially consider alternatives and look at maybe forming an assessment district and what alternative the project might go forward, was that this slide kind of characterizing the funding picture. And we asked the community and the council to recognize that the proposed rates, loans, and grants amount to a project that is financially too burdensome for the community to support an economically driven benefit. What that means is that the project cost, if we were to solely rely on rates and loans and grants that were available, that this project does not have a path forward. And so with that, our goal was to determine a funding subsidy or grant from the state or federal level, which was not currently advertised or available to ensure the project could be advanced. And so what that really 2017 feasibility study outcome was to pursue both the local and the regional sewer project versions to maximize the benefit to the town at the lowest cost, even knowing we did not have a funding source identified or confirmed at that time either. So obviously, a lot can be said about the 2018 Camp Fire, but really in the lens of the Camp Fire and post-Camp Fire recovery, not only does our community long-term recovery plan identify the Paradise Sewer Project as one of the most critical projects that affects the long-term recovery of our community, it reaffirms the importance of this project to improve groundwater quality and environmental conditions, restoring affordable housing to Paradise, and removing a major barrier for commercial recovery. And so with that in mind, in 2020, the Paradise Town Council voted to again undertake a review of alternatives, really reconsidering a potential local versus regional in the post-Camp Fire lens for the project. So the next couple of slides I'm going to summarize briefly. There's a lot of information, but that 2020 effort really does set the stage for how the project was evaluated and how we arrive here today. The Paradise Sewer Project essentially has three different choices at its basis on how it could move forward. We either don't advance the project, or we utilize a local treatment plant, or we look at a regional connection with the city of Chico. Amongst those local treatment plant options, there's different types and methods to treat and dispose of the wastewater. And so with that, you have surface water discharge, land application, and potential for beneficial reuse. So what defines a complete project? It is one that includes the collection, treatment, and dispersal. Because the town of Paradise does not have any major water bodies within it, dispersal has always been a major challenge in what really did kind of steer the project towards a regional approach with the City of Chico's water pollution control plant already in existence. But with that, our 2020 alternatives analysis matrix did look at regional versus local from these 5 different criteria: economic, social, environmental, implementation, and operational. With that, the first one, so on the right here, I'll kind of just summarize from the economic status. We looked at local. We even described it as the Miocene Canal alternative that was a third alternative discussed about collecting and exporting the wastewater out towards the Miocene Canal. But really the primary focus in the 2 competing alternatives in this study was local versus regional. And so from the economic perspective, it was pretty close, but the regional option was more beneficial to the town of Paradise when you consider the long-range operations and maintenance cost of the project. As far as the social impacts, and what does that mean? It means impacts the community during construction or permanent impacts the community, whether that be visual, noise, or odor, change in the public recreational access, and then ongoing monitoring or mitigation required. And so the regional options scored the highest for this one as well. When it comes to environmental benefits, regional also selected as the preferred alternative, or at least the highest scoring criteria, because of the simplicity of permitting, potential to avoid resources, and predictability of obtaining a permit, as some agencies are more difficult and unpredictable when it comes to issuing a permit for new wastewater discharges, and that remains true today. As far as implementation, this looks at the permits that we are looking for, the NPDES, that is the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit, railroad, Caltrans crossing permits, Cal Water approval it was considered as well. Obtaining political approvals, difficulty in obtaining political approvals or negotiating contracts. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then, of course, cooperation of local and landowners, willingness of local agricultural landowners to use treated wastewater, willingness of local landowners to sell their land as far as a project alternative. And so with that, the regional option scored the highest in that criteria as well. As far as operational, both local and regional present pros and cons, as we've seen in the development of the EIR and information you'll see in the basis of design report for the regional option. Operating and maintaining a wastewater treatment plant or leveraging an existing one requires significant effort and responsibility in managing this wastewater. So with that, in our 2020 analysis, it kind of really did score local versus regional as balanced or equal. And so when the ultimate scoring was tallied up and presented to the Paradise Town Council at the time, the regional option scored the highest, and that was the one selected. The reasons behind that, it was the lowest capital and net present value costs, it was the lowest community impacts during and after construction, the least probable environmental impacts, it was going to be the easiest to implement, and then as far as operational, it was least complicated to operate and benefits from potentially leveraging experienced Chico staff. Again, this direction was approved by the Town Council in December of 2020. So when it comes to next steps after that alternatives analysis, the Sewer Regionalization Project Advisory Committee was formed. This was comprised of the mayor and vice mayor at the time between the Town of Paradise and City of Chico. And the role of this advisory committee was to develop the principles of agreement for the city to provide the town with wastewater treatment services. The committee was also purposed to monitor overall progress of the project, including the EIR process and the associated public comment periods, as well as provide updates and recommendations back to the two councils. I'll note here, this was also briefly, I'm sorry, not briefly, but this was also facilitated by the Regional Water Quality Control Board, including involving Clint Snyder, who I mentioned earlier is on the call today. So as far as the accomplishments of that committee, they did successfully support the public outreach as a complement to the environmental impact report. They approved the principles agreement between the Town of Paradise and the City of Chico, which then fed into identifying a connection payment to the City of Chico that would be required to be paid from the town as compensation for the value of their water pollution control plant, as well as the capacity that we would be requiring. From there, we approved the intermunicipal agreement, which was the City of Chico's way in their municipal code of how regionalization comes to fruition if they so chose. And so we were able to successfully negotiate the IMA and bring it back to the Paradise Town Council for agreement. From there, the SERPAC tasked staff to continue direct coordination to identify steps in implementation, and if future meetings were needed, the committee would convene at that time. So at this point, as we're getting closer to the progressive design build process and the basis of design report, I'll show you this slide, and you've seen it before. But I'll note here that the Town of Paradise, we chose to use the progressive design build delivery model versus the traditional design bid build model to achieve cost and schedule certainty as soon as possible. In absence of using progressive design build, I think the story of this project, and as we move forward, we could have had surprises a lot later in the development when we go to see what the contracting community will bid for the project. And so I'm really grateful for the hard work that this team has done to allow us to have these discussions today versus years from now when funding is expended to complete design on a project that really no one could afford to build. So with this in mind, here's a representation of when we hired. I believe council awarded the contract in March of 2024. So really our project team, Progressive Design Build team, kicked off work in April and then of 2024. And then here today, we are really asking council to review and accept the basis of design report. And then from there, if everything were to go without any changes, we would then kick off design to get to 30% all the way through 100% design before we come to a guaranteed maximum price contract amendment. And then we build it. So that's really exciting that we have just an amazing team hired on with the Town of Paradise now that allows us to leverage experience to deliver, again, something that is cost effective and something that will hit the schedule at the right time. So With that, it is my pleasure to introduce the Carollo team again to present the findings of their basis of design report underneath the work completed by Mountain Cascade Incorporated. So with that, I'll introduce Randy Buckman.
Good afternoon. My name is Randy Buckman with Mountain Cascade. I am the project manager for the Progressive Design Build team. I'd like to start by just thanking the council for having us here today and allowing us to present our findings in the BODR. And also thank the town staff and especially Jim Goodwin and Mark Maddox and Colin Nelson for their support over the last year as we have progressed, not only entering into contract, as Scott knows, that we were able to enter in a contract relatively quickly. You know, I think it took us 2 months when usually this process would take 4 to 6 months. And from there, and as Mark said, in a short period of 10 months, we were able to deliver the BODR. I'd also like to acknowledge, as part of this process and getting us to where we are today, is the engagement from our project team partners and stakeholders of PG&E, the City of Chico, Butte County, and PID. As well as, I want to acknowledge the people from the Progressive Design Build team who aren't here. We have a large number of staff who have been committed to this project, that for both Carollo and Mountain Cascade, as well as our subcontract partners of Frugro and, sorry about that, Frugro, Rolls Anderson Rolls, and Crawford and Associates. With that being said, I would like to introduce Beverly Hahn, the Assistant Project Manager with Carollo, who will kick off the rest of the presentation.
And thank you for having us today. Do you just progress them?
Yep. And then one thing I might mention, that microphone's a little tricky, so if you can get as close as you can, that way the folks online and the folks in the back can hear you.
Okay.
Thanks, Beverly.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a kind of a short agenda to wrap up 10 months of a basis of design report. First, we'll talk about project overview and objectives, the basis of design phase, talk about the collection system and hydraulic modeling, export pipeline, a little bit on the field investigations, and then some O&M considerations that are included in the report. So quick with the project overview and objectives. You guys have seen this map. Everybody kind of understands the area. The project is defined in the basis of design report as a regionalization effort.
You can control it.
Thank you. Thank you. A regionalization effort, which includes a new collection system in town with associated pump stations and sewer, and then an export pipeline that will deliver the flow 18 miles to the Chico Water Pollution Control Plant. There are 3 key facilities along the export pipeline: the export pump station, the export transition structure, and the Chico flow control structure, which we'll talk about. This just shows kind of a schematic of what the system looks like in profile. Up top, you'll see the Town Paradise collection system and the pump stations associated that collects the flow and will allow the flow to flow by gravity down to the export pipeline pump station. That pump station was added as a way to pump the flow up and over that elevation change that you kind of see in the profile, down to the export pipeline transition structure, which collects all the flow and creates kind of a head condition that will push the flow all the way to the treatment plant. So that creates a kind of a forced gravity system to the Chico plant, which is kind of great because it avoids a lot of pump stations, but does create some design challenges because it does push flow at a very high pressure to the plant. So at the Chico plant, there is a flow control structure that is that would serve to reduce that pressure before it enters the Chico plant. The project objectives, you guys are all aware of these. We just wanted to include them to show that these are paramount to our effort. We kept them paramount to our effort as we went through all of the evaluations, and we'll keep these in mind as we continue the next phase of work. Okay, now with the basis of design, what is the purpose of the basis of design? First of all, this is really to summarize, the basis of design report really does summarize all of the technical evaluations that were completed throughout the 10 months that we did the work. And really the goal is to define the project, right? Define the project before continuing to the next phase of work. Another key thing is to summarize decisions that are made by the town along the way through those evaluations. And so through a series of technical workshops and we were able to obtain certain decisions from the town that allowed us to continue to the next phase of work. Another is to develop the conceptual cost and the conceptual design and cost of the project. And again, that is really important, as was mentioned earlier, because that does put information into the town's hands so that decisions can be made about how to proceed. And then finally, the basis of design does identify key next steps and investigations that are needed to advance to the next phase of design, which would be 30%. Just a couple of quick highlights. We did start in March and we did wrap up in December, so it did take us 10 months, which is kind of an expedited schedule for a project this large. We did have 2 parallel teams in place in order to make this work happen so quickly, both with targeted expertise, one for the collection system and one for the export pipeline and Chico connection. Both teams work very closely together, and both teams had, like I said, the targeted expertise. Darren Bowney is going to talk about the collection system stuff, and John Marshall, who's not here today, did lead the export pipeline work. There were 12 technical workshops with the town, tons of meetings, but 12 targeted technical workshops, a bunch of field investigation effort that commenced, and then some advanced hydraulic modeling, and we will talk a lot about the collection system modeling. That model helped really confirmed in a detailed way what kind of flow could be expected to enter the system, which sets the basis for our design. There was also a separate hydraulic model that was prepared for us to be able to optimize the export pipeline configuration. Development of key design criteria. Randy talked about the utility and agency. There was a lot of utility and agency coordination along the way. And then again, the updated construction schedule and cost estimate as part of the work. Not going to go through this. This just highlights table of contents for the basis of design. There's a lot of work that went into it. I don't even remember how many pages, but it's a hefty document. It summarizes all of this. These are just chapters. We did have several technical memorandum that were addressing separate concepts that were also attached to the basis of design. And I think with that, I'll pass it over to Darren to talk about the collection system.
Thanks, Bev. My name is Darren Bowney, and I'm with Corollo Engineers, and I led the basis of design phase for the collection system development. And I'll be talking about the collection system and the export pipeline facilities. So just a quick overview of the collection system. This graphic shows the conceptual design of the collection system that was developed during the basis of design phase. The flow travels from high up on the hill along Skyway, so from north to south, based on the blue arrows, and also down Clark. And then it's lifted from the bottom of Clark up to Pearson, where it flows across the town over to Skyway. The collection system is made up of sewer laterals that connect the homes to collector pipelines within the town. Trunk sewers, which are shown in green, are the main primary pipelines within the collection system. And their job is to convey the flow down to the export pipeline, which is not shown on this graphic, but is on the lower left side of the screen at Skyway. The collection system consists of small pump stations, 29 small pump stations to lift flow from low elevation neighborhoods up to the trunk lines, and then also about 4 trunk line pump stations, which are larger pump stations along the green pipelines. And their job is to lift flow into the trunk pipelines where the sewer flows downhill. And private roads and easements are a challenge. I think you are all very well aware of the number of private roads within the town, and those will require negotiations and easements to acquire the easements for the collection system within the private roads. So the sewer system collects flow from the sewer service area and conveys flow to the export pipeline. This graphic in blue shows the sewer service area and then the main pipelines throughout the town. The different colors of the pipeline show the diameter of the pipes within the system. The majority of the trunk pipelines are 8-inch diameter. There are some sections of 12-inch and even short sections of 15-inch pipelines within the system. This is a result of our hydraulic modeling that was performed during the basis of design phase. As a next step, we would refine the pipeline sizes during preliminary design and optimize, the pipeline design for cost and constructability and all the other things that we're thinking about as we're developing the design. So the baseline alternative, which is presented in the basis of design report, includes 4 trunk line pump stations. This image shows a picture of the lower portion of the collection system. The original concept included 3 trunk line pump stations as shown in red along Pearson, and then 1 at the bottom of Clark. These are obviously needed as the flow travels across Pearson's. There's several hills, so there was trunk line pump stations at the bottom of each of those hills. As we developed the conceptual design of the collection system, there was an alternative that kind of stood out and really optimized the system for the town, and that's the Pearson-Bushman alternative. And it has a primary advantage of eliminating 2 trunk line pump stations. This graphic shows how flow would split along Pearson and flow towards Bushman, down Recreation Drive, and then to a pump station at the bottom of Bushman, as shown in orange. So this is very advantageous for the town. It saves long-term O&M and cost and siting of those pump stations. This needs to be confirmed as a next step based on existing utilities in Bushman and other design things that we'd be looking at for actual design of this system. The final decision hadn't been made yet as to implement this idea. So I talked about the trunk line pump stations and small pump stations within the town. This graphic shows a schematic of the trunk line pump stations. The image on the left is a engineering drawing of a site plan. You can see the green lines coming into the pump station. From left to right, the larger pipeline is a gravity pipeline coming along a major, anywhere in the town where this might be located. Flows by gravity into the pump station where it's lifted, and then it turns into a force main, so it's under pressure, and we pump it up the hill or wherever it needs to go to flow back by gravity. So in the preliminary design, we had either 4 of these trunk line pump stations or 2, depending on the alternative that is selected. The recommended alternative also includes 29 small pump stations, and these small pump stations lift wastewater to the trunk lines, and they're needed for low elevation neighborhoods or groups of houses. You can see the small pump stations in this graphic in orange. They're kind of where the topo falls off the hill nearby the SSA. And certainly we're working very hard to optimize the number of these and reduce the number of these pump stations as we develop the design. This is a schematic of the small pump station. Similar to the trunk line pump station, wastewater would flow in by gravity and then be pumped to a trunk line as shown in the green, by the green lines. And the next step with these is to work on siting of these facilities and look at available property to locate these pump stations. So the next topic is hydraulic modeling. We performed hydraulic modeling of the collection system during the basis of design phase. The purpose is obviously to size the facilities of both in the collection system and the export pipeline. So the collection system hydraulic modeling was based on land use elements within the SSA. This graphic shows the SSA and the land use elements that were built into the model as the model was developed. I'll show you a graphic later in the presentation, but the model is a complete state-of-the-art hydraulic model of all of the pipelines within the town, both from the laterals to the collector pipes to the main trunk lines. And the hydraulic model takes into account elevations, slopes, pipeline diameters, materials, and so forth to model the system performance. So the process for estimating the average dry weather flow is shown on this slide. On the left side is the total ADWF, which is average dry weather flow in gallons per day. And each of these boxes represent critical pieces of information that were used to develop the average dry weather flow. And so it includes flow from single-family residents and multifamily residents developed in the town's plan check. So we take the number of EDUs and we multiply that by a wastewater flow factor. So that's one piece of the flow. We do a similar exercise for the flow from the commercial land use from the town's plan check information. And the plan check is obviously facilities that the town has permitted or will be built. We also consider flow from the existing structures and flow from vacant parcels. All of these pieces of information are added together to develop the average dry weather flow. This is a graphic of the full collection system model. It was created in InfoWorks ICM, which is a state-of-the-art hydraulic modeling software. You can see the town's collection system in green from the screenshot. We started this model based on the elevation data from PG&E's LiDAR survey of the town's topo. And we also started from HDR's initial conceptual design of the system layout and developed the model in additional detail during the basis of design phase. We adjusted the model based on the latest information that we were seeing in our work in the basis of design phase, and also updated all elevations as we developed the model. So the results of the collection system hydraulic modeling estimated the average dry weather flow at 0.803 MGD, million gallons per day. And you can see in this table the different components of the average dry weather flow from the single-family residents and multifamily residents to commercial to existing structures to vacant parcels and so forth. Okay, so next module I will talk about the export pipeline, and export pipeline conveys flow from the collection system to Chico's treatment plant. So this graphic shows a high-level image of the export pipeline alignment along Skyway. It obviously starts at the low side of the collection system. There's a export pipeline pump station on the upper right side of the graphic. Bev mentioned that. And we pump up a small hill and then flow by gravity. So the solid green line is called out as gravity flow. What that means is open channel gravity flow, so there would be air in the top of the pipeline. It flows as an open channel, and then we hit the transition structure, and the purpose of the transition structure is to transition from the open channel flow to pressurized flow. And that's what's shown in the dashed line is a pressurized flow condition all the way to Chico's treatment plant. It is unusual to flow at a higher pressure in wastewater. Normally is flows by open channel. That is the reason for the flow control structure with emergency bypass shown near the treatment plant. And the purpose of that facility is to reduce pressure and drop pressure as it enters the treatment plant. The transition structure is a critical facility. It will communicate through SCADA with both the flow control structure at Chico's plant and your control center. And the purpose of that is really, again, to maintain that constant pressure in the system downstream. There are several trenchless crossings along the export pipeline. Trenchless crossings present challenges during construction, and they're unique in pipeline design. Butte Creek, Highway 99, UPRR, Comanche Creek, and Little Chico Creek are the trenchless crossings that were identified during the basis of design phase. This is an example trenchless crossing at Butte Creek. During the basis of design phase, we were considering horizontal directional drilling for the installation below Butte Creek. It would likely be a 1,600-foot length crossing and tunnel about 50 feet underneath the creek. There are different methods, and we need to look at the geotech conditions at this site to determine if that is absolutely feasible or if other methods would be needed. And certainly permitting at these types of crossings are a challenge, but we had developed permitting strategies with HDR's help during the base design phase. This graphic shows the export pipeline pump station. This is the pump station at the very high end of the export pipeline. It would be located most likely near the town limits along Skyway at a preferred location. This facility includes a grinder pump station to reduce the particle size of the wastewater and reduce long-term O&M of that export pipeline. We wouldn't want to put just raw wastewater in a pressurized pipeline system that hadn't been ground. This graphic shows the transition and emergency storage structures. Again, the transition structure is a critical facility that will communicate with Chico's treatment plant and the town's facilities. And it does include emergency storage at the site. And the purpose of that is to reduce risk of a blockage causing an overflow at this facility. And then as the flow continues down to Chico, the connection at Chico's water pollution control plant is shown in this graphic. So flow from the town enters the Chico water pollution control plant through the flow control structure. This schematic on the lower left image of the slide shows the process flow as it would enter the treatment plant. The image shows the pressure reduction facilities, and then an emergency bypass to Chico's holding basins, primary holding basins. Okay, and with that, Ed's going to talk about field investigations.
Thank you, Darren. I think we're almost there. So one of the first field investigation I'll talk about is a topographic survey, and this was broken up into phases. First of all, topographic survey is really important for hydraulic evaluations and locating facilities, including kind of the depth of the sewer collection system itself and pump stations. It's also important for right-of-way and design. So the first phase, we did use PG&E LiDAR data that was received. It took a little while to kind of make sense of it, but we did get good information out of it, and we were able to use it for the collection system preliminary layout and also for the hydraulic modeling of the both the collection system and the export pipeline. This phase also included topographic survey of the trenchless crossings, which were kind of an expedited design portion of the work. And it was important for the evaluation of these crossings and for understanding the permitting and geotechnical borings that would be required for that work. Second phase we started, it's currently on hold. That include the detailed topographic survey of the export pipeline and the collection system in town, narrowed down to a prioritized collection system area. This also includes the determination and resolution of right-of-way needs for the full project. Again, this is on hold. And then this would include the location of the septic tank systems, the septic tank elevations, which helps us set this depth for the collection system itself, and then also includes LiDAR and orthographic mapping of the export pipeline system. We also completed a desktop geotechnical study of the geological, geotechnical, and environmental conditions for the project. And this really did help us confirm the extent of the varied geology throughout the overall project. So that, the project does encompass a very large area, differing elevations, and we found, as we expected, a real varied geological situation between the town, which has kind of a volcanic cap with boulders kind of along the way, and varied through six different geologic areas until we get to the town, or Chico, which has fine grain alluvium with a buried cap. Some key findings to the Some key findings from the desktop geotechnical study are showing, and as expected, cobbles and boulders along the surface. We expect those kind of along the way. Did help us identify where the majority of those issues would be identified. Those do pose challenges to trench excavation. We did also determine the groundwater elevation, also as expected, kind of the 5 to 15 feet below ground surface. That also creates construction challenges similar to the boulders. And then we also did summarize some of the hazardous materials risks that were identified along the path between the town and the Chico plant, including soil and groundwater contamination that could occur due to the septic situation over time, and some of the heavy metals and other things that could pose challenge for various reasons. A key step to this work is going to be the geotechnical borings for Butte Creek and Little Chico Creek crossing, and those do require U.S. Army Corps 408 permits, which were part of the work that was included in the basis of design and would be a future task should this portion proceed. So that's the next key step that was identified as the next step for final design. And then finally, another piece of field investigation work that we completed during the BODR was we put significant effort into really understanding how to do cost-effective geotechnical investigations for this project. It's such a big area, and putting geotechnical borings all over the place would be very expensive and intrusive, right? So we did work to find good solutions that would provide good data for design without having to undergo all of that. And so this does include electromagnetic and ground penetration radar to identify the thickness of the overburdened soil. It also would include seismic refraction surveys every 3,000 feet along the trunk line and also at each pump station and kind of spread throughout the town, and that would help us understand where the geotechnical borings need to go. And then that does kind of create a situation where we'll have test pits and limited borings at key locations. And the next module, and I think the last module, is our discussion about the operation and maintenance evaluation. There's several facilities kind of throughout the design that would require O&M. There are pump stations in town and kind of along the export pipeline as mentioned, gravity sewers throughout, manholes to access those gravity sewers along within town and along the entire export pipeline, O&M at the transition structure, and then O&M that would be required at the influent facilities at the Chico plant. We did evaluate 4 different key alternatives for how this O&M would be implemented long-term. One was that the town would operate and maintain all facilities. Another alternative was looking at the city of Chico operating and maintaining all facilities. Third alternative really looked at the town hiring a third party to do, it's not Chico, but a third party O&M firm to kind of help with the operation and maintenance of those facilities long-term. And then a fourth alternative, which was a multi-party operation. We looked at all of these in terms of cost, risk to the town, implementability, near-term and long-term, and the recommendation that was resulted in the basis of design is a multi-party operation and maintenance plan where the sewer system supervisor, the town would manage the supervision of the overall system. The town would hire a third-party contractor to do the trunk and collector pipeline, CCTVing, and jetting O&M activities, so the work in the sewer system itself. The town would operate and maintain the pump stations, both trunk and small, do the operation and maintenance at the transition structure, and also the facilities at the Chico plant. There was a discussion also about the town having help in the near term as the facilities are being commissioned and turned over, and maybe for a short period of time, but the ultimate goal is for the town to actually maintain operation of the majority of the facilities. And with that, I'll hand it back to Randy.
All right, last slide, I promise. So as you've heard, we gave you guys a lot of information. It was 10 months worth of work and hundreds of pages of a document that we spent 2 days with town staff that we just put into 20 minutes. So it's a lot of condensed information. But where does that put us now is, as Beverly mentioned, we worked in parallel during this entire time. And one of the paths that we didn't mention was that we had an estimating team working with us at the same time. So as we're going through the BODR and finding and discovering and peeling back the different layers of the project, is that we actually had our estimating team working on this as, you know, getting real-time today estimates, which is how we got to what our projected construction costs were going to be in today's times. Talking to vendors, pipe suppliers, pump station suppliers, the things that an owner typically doesn't have available to them in a traditional design bid build process. So where that puts us today is that we finished the BODR. From an engineering perspective, the collection system really isn't changed. When the town decides to proceed forward, how we decide to proceed forward is all that engineering work still had to be done. The model needed to be done, the surveying needed to be done. It's all things that are going to be useful to the town today and going forward to the project. And whether the collection system is smaller or as it's built out in phases, that information all needed to be done. So going forward, the Mountain Cascade and Corolla, we're prepared to make these changes. We're prepared to work with the town to do what's in the best interest of, as I tell everybody as we move, when we started the project, is let's always keep what's in the best interest of the project. The best interest of the project is everyone involved, all of the stakeholders, to make sure the town gets a system that not only they'll benefit from, but that they can afford. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to staff.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Yeah, when he said last slide, that was the last slide for him. I still have more. So, moving right along, I have a couple of slides here that just show kind of what we'll be coming back to as the different actions being requested by council today, but I'm not asking you to address them now. But this is the first one on the list where we are asking you to concur with staff's recommendation to accept the BODR prepared by Carollo and the Mountain Cascade team. Let's see, as we move forward, we'll get into modifying the project objectives. So now getting to project cost. So here are some slides about the project cost that Randy was just speaking to about the collection system and putting pen to paper and estimating the overall project cost. So for the collection system itself, the current estimate is about $200 million. And I find this fascinating, almost 700,000 of labor hours. 700,000 hours of labor to build the collection system. For the export pipeline, about $80 million and about 200,000 labor hours. Pretty fascinating there as well. And then as far as opportunities, meaning potential for cost savings and risks, potential for cost increases, this team did a great job of laying out some menu items that we could look at and some risks to be aware of. Leveraging, potentially reusing project spoils, importing aggregate base versus off-haul of those spoils, flagging the project for traffic control, $12 million, and possibly using a different material type and ductile iron pipe for the force main. Other issues that could present some savings for the force main cleanouts, or how we have a current plan to include fiber in the gravity collector trenches. And then as far as some risks, being the tunnel crossings, you heard those. Those are about $21 million combined between those five. And then as far as county road reconstruction, the town is very familiar with this, is making sure that roads that are recently paved are restored to a pre-project condition. And the county has the same standards, and we are very well aware that they have recently repaved portions of Skyway, as well as Hagen and I believe Midway. So there is a lot of road rehabilitation work to be completed, let alone within the town of Paradise as well. And then of course, not knowing the full complement of utilities or abandoned utilities under these roads, those are going to continue to be a challenge and risk for cost increases, local or regional project moving forward. So you have seen this slide at the December 10th council meeting where we asked HDR to develop cost estimate to complete the work that goes from pretty much here from this moment today to commissioning a regional project. And so when we saw that the numbers had increased to this level, where we're looking at a construction cost over $350 million and a total project cost of well over $400 million, is that we needed to reanalyze whether or not this project is financially feasible as currently visioned. And so here's an estimate, or at least a comparison of the project estimates, and I'll be the first to state that each one of these iterations really isn't like for like, but they're close. But in fact, in 2012, an engineering report really did say that we could build the sewer project for $29 million. With what I know today, there's no way that was possibly true. But what I really want to highlight is what did we learn between 2023 and 2024, and I think you heard a lot of that today already in the development of the BODR, and the BODR informs those project decisions that affect project cost. But above that and above inflation, all the other things that have occurred to our global economy that affect the project, we have finally been able to engage with a contractor that has experience working in the actual conditions of Paradise. We are the furthest along in that 50 years of all those project studies. We're the furthest along this project has ever been to actually building it. And so with that information, advancing the BODR, getting close to design, this is the best information to have an accurate estimate of what it costs to build it. That doesn't mean that we have to like it, though. Obviously, the project is very costly, but when you really do take a step back and you look at the project by the numbers, and you look at this list here of 365,000 linear feet of pipe, almost the same distance to get from the town of Paradise to the Sacramento International Airport, That is a long way to go to build average trench depth if we were to average it out, at least 5 feet deep, 365,000 linear feet, almost 900 manholes in the collection system, 32 pump stations and structures, 5 trenchless crossings, 500,000 tons of base rock, 123,000 tons of asphalt for road rehab, and almost 1 million hours of labor to build this. And so if we were to say, 8 months ago that we'd come up with this set of stats about the project and it's going to cost over $400 million, understanding what the economy is and the cost of construction, that number probably wouldn't have shocked any of us at that point. But with the BODR complete, we have the information we have today that we did not have beforehand. And so with that, I'll transition the presentation to our funding pursuits that are expected to match. As I mentioned at the kickoff of this meeting, we do not have enough money to build this project on our own forces. We have to do this together with someone. And so we are working with a lot of different agencies, and we have been for a long time, to try and do something that hasn't ever fit neatly into a grant program about building a new wastewater treatment plant. These programs that exist are largely for expansions or working together, on a minor upgrade or extension of existing collection system. We are trying to put the first foot of pipe into the ground and get that wastewater treated somewhere. And so with that, our ability to secure funding has been a combination of USDA funds, HUD funds through the CDBG-DR program that was really only made possible by the 2018 Camp Fire, US EPA through congressionally directed spending, $1.75 million, and then of course the State Water Board has been instrumental in our feasibility studies and portion of our environmental document to get through that phase. As far as funding opportunities reviewed, we've been looking at FEMA PA, the FEMA BRIC program, US EDA, USDA again, US Army Corps of Engineers. I'll have more on that in a little bit. And of course, still the State Water Board, and then looking at federal and state advocacy efforts as well. As far as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, this is relatively a new program. I'll highlight it again, just like I did last month, where this is a program that is really kind of partnership-based, where U.S. Army Corps can be a lead agency on a segment of work towards a project, and we've had an initial consultation. There's potential for a $50 million allocation that works through Congressman LaMalfa's office, as well as far as an appropriation that's been made, but is not necessarily an obligation at this point. But we do believe this is a promising avenue to advance the project forward, especially if we were to look at wastewater treatment plant moving forward. And then, of course, we're still going to continue to pursue the existing septic to sewer conversion programs that the state, again, is managing all of the state's priorities across. At this point, if we're looking just at the regulations, black and white, we could potentially be available for an award of an additional $30 million. And then, again, highlighted last month, but I'll say it again here, from the time we started to look at regionalization to where we are today, the state's financial situation has changed drastically from a surplus to a deficit, and no program across the state has been spared, including the Water Board and the Septic to Sewer Conversion Program. But one thing that is new is the California Prop 4 did pass, and we are still working with the governor's office and our state lobbyists to see how the town of Paradise can try and reserve a portion of that funding or advocate for funding to be directed from this program to the town's Paradise Sewer Project. And so we will be working tirelessly on that until we have more answers for you. So with that, I'm getting ready to hand it over here to Clint Snyder to join us virtually, but I'll do a quick moment to summarize really the work that they have done, and Clint specifically has participated in the Paradise Sewer Project since 2020. Originally, the Regional Water Quality Control Board did engage and participate in our Phase 1 environmental analysis. That goes back to the scoring criteria that I talked about, where we selected regionalization with the town and HDR. They performed their own independent analysis of the town's potential avenues forward. They recommended the town advance the regional option with the City of Chico, and they facilitated that sewer regionalization project advisory committee I discussed earlier as well. And really, they've been wonderful to work with as far as being a liaison in our ongoing cost analyses and our funding opportunities with the State Division of Financial Assistance through the Water Board. So with that, I will ask Clint to join us. Clint, can you hear us okay? And test your mic?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Clint. And so with that, I might try and just minimize, I don't know if you have your camera on, but I will try and bring you up to the screen here in the room. One moment. There you are. Clint, would you be so kind to really summarize your role in the project and where we've been and where we're going moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, Mayor Crowder, members of the board. My name is Clint Snyder. I'm one of the assistant executive officers here at the Central Valley Water Board, and I manage the board's Reading office. I might just start by saying that we have been involved with the campfire almost from day one, not just with regard to the sewer project, but the wildfire response and recovery through the hazard debris and hazard tree removal, then onto the North Complex fire, the Dixie fire, and most recently the Park fire. I just say that so you understand we've been there, through all of those things, ground up, and really that work sort of extends to what we're trying to do here with the sewer regionalization project. As Mayor Crowder knows, we were there when the idea was put forth to start talking about sewer collection and treatment system options. We spent quite a bit of time working early on to identify what options were available to update the 2017 feasibility study to account for the losses in the town of Paradise through population and homes, revitalizing that feasibility study to account for all of that, and then kind of taking this next step of now what? How do we respond to this? How do we best construct and support the town in constructing the sewer collection and treatment system? Went through a number of feasibility studies there, and just as Mark and Crollo engineers walked through earlier, there were a number of factors that came into play early on to help us make that informed decision of whether or not to pursue a local treatment option or the alternative, pursue a regionalization option. I won't go back through those factors. Based on the scoring of each one of those, it became clear that the regionalization option long-term would present the best case for the town of Paradise and its residents. A lot of work has been done since then, including the SERPAC, mayors and vice mayors of both the town and the city. A lot of bridges were built, a lot of trust, and sort of working together on both municipalities' parts to get a lot of that work done. And a lot of work was done. Updating that feasibility study in 2017, the principles of agreement, that thing came together relatively quickly in a public setting. The EIR was developed and certified along with a bunch of work within the city of Chico that was necessary to build out that EIR and come up with some of the calculations that were necessary for not just the connection fee, but volume and treatment upgrades to the city of Chico's wastewater treatment plant. The intermunicipal agreement, LAFCO agreements, and the list just goes on. So I'll just say that with regard to Mark and his team and Jim, your town manager, it's been a tremendous lift. We here at the Central Valley Water Board have the largest region in the state. We sort of oversee operations in 38 counties and portions thereof, and I'll tell you hands down, the team that the town of Paradise has put together is it's phenomenal. And honestly, one of the reasons that I've been involved in this and continue to back it 100% to this day. The decisions facing you today are not easy. I totally understand that. It was a tremendous blow, I think, on all of our parts to sort of reach that decision point. Happy to talk more about that today, the factors that are involved in that. But I hope that the town council sort of understands that those decisions aren't taken lightly. They're not recommended lightly. Nonetheless, we're here to talk about that today and get some direction one way or the other from town council through these conversations. So thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Clint, I appreciate it. We're winding down, and then again, the council will have opportunity to ask questions, whether it be of myself, the HDR team, the PDB team, or certainly Clint on the call. So thank you again, and I will keep going in the presentation. Thank you for bearing with me. All right, so as Clint said, it's clear to us, and you heard him as well, that they still understand the goal and objective of the project and that it remains unchanged, and support the town in securing construction funding moving forward for a revised local treatment plant alternative if that's the direction we want to pursue. So with that, we are asking the second item for council to provide direction on next steps and commence requirements and impacts for modifying the project description for the Paradise Sewer Project from a regional connection to the city of Chico to a potential local treatment plant option. Further direction is requested on potential alternatives for a phased approach to reach the full intended sewer service area. I really want to be clear there that our goal to collect and treat wastewater of the same sewer service area ultimately remains unchanged. So that original graphic with the orange areas, that remains changed. How we get there and our expectations on timeline and where first and how it's phased out over the next years, even if it takes decades, that is something that we would really be happy to deliver, that full original intended sewer service area. But our goal is to get something in the ground and get a project complete here as quickly as possible. So speaking of that, the next section relates to the revised project. And so I really see this as a roadmap to the next steps. Step 1A, revise the project. Again, I'll reiterate, same project objectives as it was before. And our next critical path item is to select a startup project that really allows us to scale to the original service area. Wastewater treatment plant location needs to be determined, a treatment type needs to be determined, and the discharge location needs to be determined. All of the factors that made a local treatment plant very, very difficult back in 2020 and 2017 and 2012 exist today. And so those still need to be tackled, and we plan to do so as quickly and swiftly in partnership with the council and the community as possible. From there, we can revise the environmental document. This is by no means starting over and a 4-year endeavor to get to where we are today on this new project description. We see a path to quickly and swiftly revise necessary documents to take this information, as you heard from the PDB team, and use it moving forward. Obviously, there will be new impacts to the project that need to be studied in that revised document. The siting of the treatment plant, aesthetics, odor, operations, all still need to be determined. Step 1B, pursuing funding and design work, pursuing the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers funding for a segment of work, being the wastewater treatment plant, seems like a viable option. Certainly nothing is set in stone at this point. And likewise, pursuing available state funding for this revised collection system and phased approach. And then concurrently, we can have our teams continue on design work, which would be excellent as hopefully see all these things come together in the next couple of years. So what does that look like moving forward? Step 1A being the project alternatives we plan to bring back to the council, but I have more information here in a moment on kind of our preview. Information on project alternatives, really 3 distinct alternatives that can differentiate individually from quite a few different ways, but we will have information on treatment process and technology, discharge location and method, estimated user connections, project examples of where it's been done elsewhere in the state, estimated total project costs between these alternatives, and again, comparing them amongst each other, providing council adequate information to make a selection to move forward. So with that, here is what I would describe as a preliminary preview of an alternative, of 3 alternatives, one Skyway, one Neil, and then one Clark. These are all just conceptual in nature. They could be scaled up for more parcels if our budget or funding would allow. They could be scaled down. But ultimately, we need to find a wastewater treatment plant location and discharge methodology, and from there, the information from the BODR and the collection system, again, can be scaled up or down to match what we are really hoping for is a design to fund or design to build and fund approach here on the project. And so this is one option that really does try and leverage a lot of efficiencies in the vacant parcels in the downtown commercial core, Paradise High School. We've heard a lot of feedback about existing businesses and existing schools that are waiting on this project to be completed as quickly as possible. This hits a few objectives as far as the state's priorities with residential connections over commercial, but then it could provide some opportunities with EDA to potentially review more commercial connections that they might be interested in partnering on the project. So this is kind of a well-rounded approach that I would say has the biggest risk factor of a more local, and I mean local, wastewater treatment plant. As far as the next alternative, you'll see kind of in the bigger part of the screen is a zoomed out view of Paradise here with a similar collection system than the previous one, but maybe a little bit smaller to account for kind of this base project requiring a similar export pipeline than what was discussed for regionalization, but much shorter distance to just get down Neal Road to maybe potentially look at a treatment plant near the landfill or somewhere area that is further out of town where you don't have the same type of impacts of having residential neighborhoods or a gateway into the town, having a treatment plant sited within visibility area. So this is one option that can be reviewed as well as scaling up or down the sewer service area accordingly. The last one, if the council or the community had an interest in advancing a project location that served the Clark Road corridor first, here is one option that could look like, where the parcels that were originally included in the SSA between Wagstaff and Lower Clark could be included with maybe a wastewater treatment plant sited in the vicinity of vacant land near Paradise Community Village. That is, again, just one option that is something to look at. But amongst all three of these, the same factors I discussed earlier about treatment type and discharge and how we handle that effluent, because the two byproducts of wastewater treatments are solids that are usually landfilled or used for some other beneficial reuse, and then that effluent, which can also be used for irrigation if there is a market for it and an appetite for the cost of redistribution of that water. Those two things have to be decided at all three of those locations. And as I share with you these maps, none of those decisions are set in any stone or even known at this point, but we are most eager to determine that so we can move forward with one of these as quickly as possible. But this is just an example of what a Clark First SSA Phase 1 approach might look like. All right, so now getting close to wrapping up the presentation, I mentioned earlier a lot about the Paradise Sewer Project Regionalization Advisory Committee. The accomplishments were noted and the purpose was fulfilled. But at previous council meetings, there's been discussion about the desire for a new ad hoc committee. And here is some thoughts about what the role of this committee could be. It could be with the change of anticipated in project direction, staff believes it is critical for the town council to follow, develop, and support closely. An ad hoc committee will provide an avenue for staff to meet at regular intervals with the two council members appointed to assess opportunities for potential action. The project team would report more frequently as this progresses to the entire council. And once appointed, staff and the committee will determine a meeting schedule and format to ensure an ongoing review and engagement in this new direction for the sewer project. So lastly, this third action item on the agenda summary here and this presentation is to appoint two council members to serve on this ad hoc committee, replacing the previous SERPAC between the Town of Paradise and City of Chico and Regional Water Quality Control Board. So getting to a summary of the presentation, let's see, about an hour and 15 minutes, we are asking council to concur with our recommendation to accept the BODR to provide direction on pivoting the project towards a local wastewater treatment plant and everything that goes with that, and appointing two council members to serve on an ad hoc committee. What we see moving forward from here is a future council meeting, which we could present the project fact sheets to select an alternative for a revised environmental and permitting effort. And then behind the scenes from there, our staff mission will be to achieve certainty for a treatment type and discharge location, our funding potential with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, as well as new funding potential and timelines for the revised project with the state. Lastly, my closing remarks, I saw this today, and sometimes you stumble across a graphic that you really needed to C is how we define success and is rarely linear. And being part of this project almost every day in my now, since 2012, 13-year career, 12-year career with the town of Paradise, the Paradise Sewer Project is anything but a straight line to success. But with that, I'm really, really confident about our potential moving forward and that we had to investigate the regional option when we did, and that way it no longer exists in the background as something nice that sounds great. Now we can officially say that it's been fully explored and it's just not going to work. But with that, our commitment and our desire for the community is, again, as was stated numerous times, is in what's best for the project, which is what's best for the town, which is what's best for our residents. And so I'm really excited about the potential for this project moving forward. I'm really proud of the team that has put in all of this effort to get us where we are today. And so with that, I'll leave it to the council and the community for questions. And just, again, thank you for your time this afternoon. And all of us remain available to exhaust any questions you have at this moment.
Well, I think council's got a lot of questions, and I think we'll start here to address each issue 1, 2, and 3 in order. So whoever'd like to start.
One of my first questions that I've been looking for a little bit of clarity on is in all of the information that was contained in that 800-plus page report, I wasn't able to isolate a clear consolidated statement of the overall costs that demonstrated how we went from the $300 million price tag that was referenced at the September presentation at the council meeting to the November 15th-ish jump to $460 million. So I very likely could have missed it, but I went over that quite a few times.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. So for the costs, we have a division of labor for the project, and the basis of design report did not include an update of the construction cost model. And so that construction cost model, you heard Randy discuss that a little bit. And so that's not included in the BODR, and intentionally so, because the basis of design report is what informs that construction cost model. And so if we were continuing with the project as currently visioned, the BODR would then be translated to an engineer's estimate on the construction cost. But with that said, as Randy mentioned, and you saw a lot of information in the presentation on costs, we had enough information to understand that there was a problem, and really directed them to stop work on anything that does not have a direct benefit to the potential future of the project. And so whether it was 400 million or 450 million or even 300 million at this point, we know it's a project that is not financially feasible. And so we have reserved that budget for future work. If there is a desire for a more detailed engineer's estimate or construction cost model update based on the old version of the project, that is certainly something we can go back and develop further. But between the town staff, between Guy Voss, our HDR owner's agent, and his experience in delivering progressive design build projects, we have enough information to know that the project as visioned is not financially feasible moving forward. So that's kind of what I'd like to say to that question.
I do trust that, because it's not that I don't believe that it is not financially feasible, but in the interest of not finding ourselves in a similar situation in another 6 years, I'd like to understand definitively how we got $160 million off in a 2-month, time frame. And, I just have to understand that to know how we can avoid that moving forward. And to date, I haven't been provided the actual source documents demonstrating that jump.
Okay.
It's just been verbal.
Understood.
And I would say that is a concern of mine. That's a big concern of mine is I kind of get, because I was in on this from the beginning too, and I know where we started, and I can understand where we went from 177 million to 300 million. I can get that. But from several months getting, almost a potential $200 million jump, I'm having a hard time understanding. And in that short time, there seems to me we should have known earlier that this was, and I agree, it's not feasible at the amount of money it is now. And, you know, we went this direction of the pipeline. That was not our first choice to go there. Our first choice was actually to have our own. And we were discouraged from doing that because regionalization was the way that we were told was the best way to go and the less complicated and what have you. So we went that direction.
Yeah.
And kind of feels like, you know, right at the last, you know, at the 20-yard line, we kind of had the rug yanked out from under us. And I just, did these costs arise in the last 60 days? This other 100, this from 300 to 450, 480, whatever it is, is that only in the last 60 days that this really arose?
Well, I don't think rising costs is something new to the last 60 days, no. As far as the scale, for me, you know, understanding that once that there was a project well over $400 million, that is new. And that's when we convened the workshop with our funding entities. And that's when we stopped work on the regionalization temporarily. And from there, we have advanced to this point to really look at potentially changing direction, because there became a clear threshold that had been passed, that this is no longer reasonable to expect the state or anyone to partner with a project of this scale and need that, you know, in some cases consumes more allotment of programs for the entire state of California here in our one community. So when that information became available to me, is that we paused that work and started a process that led us to today.
My question is, on slide 73, when you showed the project estimates over time, back in 2020, when this was, you know, relatively new after the fire, and the long-term recovery plan said, you know, we're going to do this, and we created this sewer assessment district, or whatever it was called. The estimate then was $171 million, 2020. So then in 2022, it jumped to 200 and, I can't read it, it's so small. It was 233. Okay, so we're still on track. Even though we didn't have the funding, of course, back then we were being told by the water board the state wasn't broke and they were going to help us get some money. And then it jumped in 23 to $300 million. Why? I don't understand. If we know that we don't have the money, and with your argument right there saying, oh, gee, we can't expect the state to commit that kind of money to our little town when they have the whole state to get money for. You know, at $300 million, we knew we couldn't do this. Why didn't we pull the plug then or change something then? I mean, it's kind of, we went from under $200 million when this concept developed, when we started down this path. And I don't know what these are when you say they're project estimated costs. Who estimated this?
Various engineering teams at the time based on the year identified.
And they're that far off, or it's just that inflation has done that?
No, I believe that the prior estimates, in absence of the work done to develop the BODR, were very off.
So how can we avoid that moving forward?
Well, now with the BODR complete and all of the work we can leverage moving forward, we can set a target. I don't have funding secured. Again, the town needs to depend on other entities to help build and fund this project. So with the information we have completed to date, we can set a project alternative that is more manageable. I don't even have a number that could go with it. It could be a $100 million project. There's still no program that is going to give us $100 million at this point moving forward. So what we are trying to do is adapt to the best as we can with the information we have, is that the regionalization is not something we can pursue because the distance between the two communities and the benefit and the lens of our reduced population, it does not pencil out. So with that, we need to identify a version of the project, come up with what those might look like as far as costs, and then continue to advocate at the state and federal levels to say, is this more fundable moving forward? As far as cost increases for potential, right now we have no idea about the impacts to the contracting community and the construction community about what potential changes and tariffs and the economy moving forward that could affect project costs. But what we can say is every month's delay increases this project's cost. And so whether it's comparing 2020 to 2024, or from 2024 to 2027, this delay costs the town and the project money. And so I think those cost increases will continue, but we need to try and present to our funding partners a version of this project that is scalable, that has a vision of the ultimate sewer service area, and that is, again, something that can be actually completed and constructed from a treatment and dispersal approach.
So is Clint still with us, or?
Yes.
So, Clint, this is Steve Crowder. I have a question. So, going forward, we get to a more manageable state. What can we count on from the water board as far as help, support, money towards the project? What are we looking at? Because we don't, can we get a permit for it? And B, what contribution, what help can we count on? Because I don't want to end up back here again. We need to move forward, and we need some guidance, direction, money, and help. So what can you tell us?
Yeah, maybe I can back up just a second. I know there were a couple of questions there with regard to the 300,000. I just want the council to know that, even with the 300 million, all the way up until a few months ago, we were engaged in conversations with the State Water Board's chair, the State Water Board's executive director, the director of Division of Financial Assistance, and I can tell you in certainty that the State Water Board, Cali PA, Division of Financial Assistance included, and the Central Valley Water Board, my board members themselves, and our executive officer are still fully behind this project. We understand the importance of sewer in the community and finding a reasonable way to treat the wastewater and dispose of it, as was mentioned earlier. None of that has changed. The only thing that really changed was the new estimate being as high as it is. You combine that with the state budget situation that we're in and the federal funding uncertainty, and it just didn't make sense to move forward under that same scenario. All of that said, to get to your point, what kind of assurance can we provide? I'm still here. I'm here today as I was on day one. I'm as committed as I was on day one to find an alternative for the town. I think the advantage that we have right now, should the council make the decision to pivot to a local treatment option, is that there are a lot more options available to us. With the regionalization project, you have to figure out a way to get that wastewater from the town to the city of Chico, and there really aren't any variables there that provide any cost savings, that's really meaningful. A pipeline is a pipeline. The crossings and all the things that go with that they're just a tremendous cost. If the town were to choose to put together a sewer collection system, and as you saw earlier, there are options to right-size that. We have plenty of options for local treatment, especially in light of some recent treatment plants that were built, including the city of Mount Shasta. We know what the costs of those are, and we know the quality of effluent that those treatment plants can produce, and there are options. With regard to it being treatable or buildable, permittable, there are uncertainty in terms of treatment options. I would say the only challenge
To that, the response will be, should the town decide to discharge to surface water, receiving water. There really aren't any good receiving waters to discharge to, simply because of the size and the flows in some of the critters. But when discharge options are plentiful, there are a number of ways that we can size that facility. And I think, we're all as committed as we were before to figure out how to get that done. It really is just, a decision on behalf of the council. Do they want a local discharge option? If the answer is yes, then we'll immediately begin working with the State Water Board, DFA, to figure out the funding that's available and come up with some options to try to right-size the project to available funding, even if that means phasing it over, a number of different years. But all of those conversations can happen after today's decision.
Okay, I think we've all talked about this as far as the regional ones out. Have we stopped working on any of the engineering work towards a regional solution? Are we still spending money on that?
No, we stopped at the first juncture where we reported to the council on this, and I actually did put a hold on regionalization expenditures long ago.
So I keep hearing questions about which solution we're going to go with. Obviously, the regional is out. I don't see any way we can go forward on that. And I don't know why we're even asking what we're going to do. We're going to have to go to a local solution, and that's the only option that's available to us now.
Yes, that's the direction staff is recommending. We just need that formal approval from council to undertake actions, including revising the EIR, working with our funding agencies, revising the project description, understanding the impacts of that. So we need that direction from the council. At this point, we're not asking, regional or local. It's recommending to move forward with the local.
A local solution.
Yep.
Okay.
So I did have, I would like to, see of this 800-plus page report and all of the work that collectively has been done by all of these different organizations, I would like to see it actually defined what of that work is translatable to whatever direction we pivot, not just some of it, most of it, whatever. I would like to color code it, something at a glance. What can we take forward
Yeah, I mean, just
to quantify it?
sorry for the flashing lights here. That was a lot. But when we look at where's the table of contents? Okay. Not to just go line by line here, but I will definitely say that, portions of the field investigations, understanding the utilities, the hydraulic model, design criteria and standards, the collection system chapters are going to be reusable. Strategies for lateral connections, data acquisition, instrumentation design, that's going to be critical moving forward. Environmental design considerations, property acquisition, right-of-way needs, all of these, really just mostly anything related to the export pipeline is not going to be salvageable.
But don't all of those technically have something to do with outside of the town limits?
Yeah, portions of them. So
Yeah.
anything related to the export pipeline is not usable moving forward. Anything related to everything else is.
Can I get that in a report format that shows all the green stuff is usable moving forward, all of the red stuff is not, something at a glance? Because that's just kind of a summary, and I would like to move forward with actual hard facts here.
Yeah.
And back to the documentation of where that price jump was, you referenced earlier when you became aware of it, which I'm assuming was the November 15th meeting with all of the stakeholders?
No, I was aware before then.
Okay, so is it possible for us, myself and/or the rest of the council to see the source documents of when the town and/or yourself became aware of that price jump?
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm in the same position as Heidi on this. As if I understand from our last meeting or one of these meetings, this design build, we're being asked to accept this report, which is on a system that we're rejecting, we can't afford. So I'm curious, because you kind of are making reference to where, well, a lot of this work we don't have to do again, we can use. And apparently this report cost us roughly $3 million. Is that correct?
I don't believe that's entirely accurate.
How
I'd
much
have to
was
look
it?
at the number. I don't have the
What
number.
have we spent so far? I thought you mentioned that. So far we'd spent, so
Oh.
there was a $5 million grant. So far we spent $3 million.
Yeah, no, that's a contract as far as with our owner's agent, HDR. I'd
that
have,
what?
that number that you're referring to is the contract amount that's expended for our services with HDR, as far as serving as our owner's agent. I can get the number, the price for the BODR.
Okay,
for
okay,
you
yeah, that would be,
separately.
and I'm like, so what specifically, I don't want I don't need, if it's just, of any one of these things that are in here, which ones can be applied to a local thing? So I understand some of these, just probably the whole section will, but some of these aren't, because if we're not pumping all this stuff all the way to Chico, again, we don't know if we're gonna do like your Clark Road idea, might be gravity fed. We don't, so some of this stuff that, like on the collection stuff, maybe it's not gonna, all those pump stations and lift stations, all these little, $100,000 deals aren't gonna be necessary. Maybe they are, I don't know.
Well-
But it would be nice to see what is.
Yeah, and so that's certainly something that we can do with the alternatives analysis on those three different options. When you refer to the cost of the collection system and whether, same number of pump stations, I would just say, if we were just serving the same service area, the project alternatives between a local treatment plant and a regional option, the only difference is going to be that export pipeline. So all of the pump stations that you heard about in this presentation would still be required if we're sewering the same area.
Okay.
If we break it into pieces, only those little areas with those pieces, maybe with some fluctuations based on the number of connections and flows. But in general, if we're looking to build out a collection service area for the local plant, it's going to be the same as what's included in this report.
So what would the cost be for a local plant that does the entire sewer service area right now?
Oh, I don't have that cost at this point. You've heard about, again, because we have not, received direction from the council to investigate the local option.
I'm just looking for an estimate. You
I
said
understand.
earlier that the collection system was 200 million, and export pipeline was 80 million, plus you had these other things.
Right.
Is that the number we're thinking about? You just knock off 80 million off that, and it's 200 million plus those other costs, or what?
Oh,
I don't even have a sense of how big this is.
Yeah, as far as building a local wastewater treatment plant, I think it's easy to estimate, well over 25 million.
Plant.
For the plant.
Okay, plus
Yep.
the collection system's 200 million?
Yes, if you were to build the same collection system as originally specified.
So is there money in the budget anywhere for that size of a plant, system? I didn't hear that from you when you were going through the options.
In this budget,
Yeah.
no, right now we are looking for funding to build any version of the project, including a local wastewater treatment plant. So,
$25 million is not out there, is what you're saying?
no, that is not what I'm saying, is we are actually working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I can go back to that slide. 50. Here we go. So this, at this point, appears to be the most promising lead. Certainly nothing is official, nothing is committed, and it will be quite some time. But the Army Corps of Engineers really does specialize in taking projects on and building them. And so if we are looking to potentially have a partnership on this project, this is a great synergy, I would say, to where it is likely that they could build a treatment plant, and they have experience doing this in other communities, and while the town takes the lead on the collection system. And so if the direction is given by council for us to move forward, we will continue our lead with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers about this program to try and capture as much of that $50 million likely award as possible to potentially build the entire water treatment plant.
What
We
does it
still have
mean?
to go after the money for the collection system.
Absolutely, yes. And so that's what you heard from Clint here today. We're working with him, we're working with the state, we're working with the governor's office to try and secure funding. The part that is the most, I don't want to repeat myself, but is the most frustrating part of searching for funding in this universe of, state programs, federal programs. Again, no one is funding, ground zero wastewater treatment plants at all. And so we are trying to do something that really has never been done. The City of Chico's water pollution control plant was built in the 1930s. It was just a different time where investments of that type of infrastructure were captured, and for some reason, the town of Paradise, up until this point, was unable to do that.
Okay.
And so we are trying to convince those that have influence of decisions of large amounts of money to dedicate to our very, very critical project that our entire community is waiting for.
So Mark, this one you got up there now says 75, up to a 75% match?
Up to 70, I guess a better way of saying that is the local match could be up to 25%.
Okay. So one of the things, since we don't know how big or where, but a lot of the data that's in this report we're asked to accept is based on this sewer service area, right? And it said early in these, way back when we were talking about a clustered wastewater system for the downtown, it was commercial only. And then after the fire, when this thing grew even beyond, you know, where we're going to include all, because we were going to just be Skyway and the high school picking up, and that was on the old clustered wastewater system. And what concerns me is that in this report we got, it talks about, showed all these residential connections and very little, and even on some of the studies, and very little commercial connections. And what I don't think anybody, more than the cost of building, or in addition to the cost of building the thing, because we all know we're going to have to go find other people's money to build it, is there's got to be some meetings with stakeholders, with the people that you've included in this, in these numbers of residential connections, and see whether or not, what the cost is going to be for these people. Even a ballpark cost, because people with a working septic system aren't going to change. I mean, it's a big deal. You may go find the money and spend a lot of money on design and find out that people don't want it, aren't going to hook up to it.
Well, that's also concerns me, what the O&M tail on this thing. Yeah, you get the capital to build something, and if we don't get the connections like Woody's talking about, we're going to have to take that out of the Fire Victims Trust money that we got and pay for the O&M yearly until we grow the number? Is that, you know, are we going to put ourselves in the hole because of that?
Well, to answer that question is based on council direction and what the town did. I don't know the exact meeting, but we presented a operations and maintenance plan and recognized that in order for this to be feasible, and why we're not interested in a 2% or forgivable loan, is because every dollar of interest further burdens the ratepayers. The impacts of the 2018 Camp Fire just continue to show their face here for our entire community and this project. And so without a full rate-paying base, what was already going to be expensive monthly rates, I mentioned the 2017 study, pre-fire, identified that these rates were, you know, really unaffordable. And so what we did is we brought this information to the council last year and said that even based on a requirement of the funding package with the Division of Financial Assistance, looking at a rate analysis that said, if we secure 100% grant funding, we're still going to have monthly rates on average in the range of $200 or $400 a month. And obviously that's not affordable. And so what we presented to the council was an operations and maintenance assistance plan to where for the first 10 years, the town of Paradise as an entity would contribute funding to subsidize rates until a point that the population could pay for itself.
Yeah, that's
And
with
so,
a full-up system though, right?
what-
As you got laid out there.
What's
Now,
that?
if you only build a small one, you still have those O&M costs and all that. We'll have less ratepayers to subsidize, to pay for that.
Yes,
So that's
exactly.
going to make our problem worse?
Oh, I'm sure it's not going to make it better. That's for sure. But if the cost to deliver the project is less, and you know, the type of treatment and all of the things that go into O&M, yes, a lot of those are going to be about the same. And so your point's well taken. It's going to be very difficult to do a local treatment plant, you know, whether to build it or to operate and maintain it. But it's still something that's worthwhile, and we will absolutely, when we get further along and vetting this project out, communicate and report back what those costs could look like.
So I haven't had a great deal of time to go over it, but we have a little deal that was put in front of us with Biofiltro, which I don't know a lot about it other than I looked into it a little bit, involving worms. And it is being used here in California. So I would say, can we look at things maybe outside of the box that we were normally going to look in, that maybe would have a more reasonable cost and even maybe a more reasonable operation figure? Is that something we can do?
Yeah, the town staff and our team remains committed to delivering the best version of this project at the direction of this council. So whether that's to look at worms or lowering the groundwater table to do something local, I've heard that recently. And so if you'd like us to spend time on other alternatives, we would take that direction and report back.
Mr. Mayor, council members, if I could just make a distinction in terms of your actions today. Accepting the BODR is accepting that the work that has been done by the contractors met the standard of what they were contracted to do. The fact that we are choosing now to pivot and go a different direction than to complete the full project that they were completing the basis of design report on is a separate action, which is why the additional 2 actions in terms of you giving us different direction and then setting up a committee to work with staff to do that are 2 different actions. But accepting the BODR is acknowledging that the contractors have delivered the work product that they were contracted to do.
Have we had any conversations with, we're talking to the water board and all that, have we had any conversations with like PID?
As far as what?
Well, as far as, are they interested in becoming involved? Do they have any ideas? Do they have any land? Maybe we could, I mean, just, we ought to talk to everybody. I mean, they're people that deal with water and deal with pipes. And so maybe we should have a conversation with them, see if they're even interested in being, we're looking for a solution. And obviously, whatever path we were, and I believe that we were sent down this regionalization path. I don't believe we chose it. I believe we were sent down it. And now we've spent a lot of money to find out we can't afford it. And it's like, I want a Ferrari, but I can't afford one. So you don't see me driving one. So we're not going to hook up to Chico, but let's talk to whoever's in town. I think we need to, I appreciate the public being here today. I think we need to have more involvement. Maybe we should put a couple of citizens on this subcommittee so that they're involved, because this is a big deal. We're making plans for a walkable downtown that if we don't have a sewer, all of that idea goes out the window, because restaurants aren't going to build here if they don't have a way to treat their septic system. So I don't know, just let's talk to everybody. These other ideas, let's explore every idea there is. And if I understand Jim's point, okay, the work we asked you to do, you did. None of which we can use, or okay, maybe some of which we can use, so stop that work. So I don't know, are they still on contract, or are they gonna go, we're gonna give more money to go figure out what we're trying to figure out? We don't know. I mean, you made 2 suggestions. Are there others? You made 2 suggestions based on the same kind of sewer treatment, period. You haven't made any suggestions or alternatives that do anything else. So I'm just curious.
So I get why we need to approve where we've been so far. And do we have, I think what council's looking for is and I guess we don't have that now. So we can use a good part of this going forward.
Yes.
But we don't have a sense of how much we've spent that's not going to be usable.
Oh, I can come up with a number, I don't have it right in front of me, about the costs associated with the export pipeline studies that's included in the BODR. I'd be glad to find that for you.
Okay, so with that being said, what,
I think it sounds like collectively, all of our snags with item 2A1 relate to having a cost estimate of what has been spent by HDR and on the BODR to date. What information, what data within that we can utilize moving forward for a ridge, processing and treatment, and the source documents of the price jump. So it seems like if we can carve that out and decide on accepting or not accepting item 2A1, does that cover that? What all of our issues are with 2A1?
I think so.
So we can be provided those three
Yeah.
items? Okay.
Yep.
So then I think we can consider that.
Do you have cards?
well, we're getting to comments, but it's going to be, the comments, if I understand correctly, is at the end of everything, is that correct?
Yeah, like any other action item, you will discuss with staff, get all your questions answered, then allow the public to comment.
So is that per,
No, not yet.
so that's per item, or that is at the end where the comments are?
I would encourage you to just allow public comment now and then take your actions at the end.
Okay. So with that, cards, Melanie?
Yes, my first card is for JT Martin.
So I don't think we've really gotten all the way through everything, but I'm with, like Woody asking about all the alternatives. It seems like nobody's really looked at like what the problem is, and in Paradise, the problem is really just affluent, correct?
Can you say that?
The problem is really just affluent, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so we're designing the system to handle solids and affluents?
Yeah, there's alternatives within that to look at a step system which would allow solids to stay on private property and then effluent be treated and collected. But yes.
Okay, because that's my concern, is that all of this money is being spent designing something we don't need. And I agree, there needs to be public comment, public meetings, something. There are tons of systems in the state that are not just a city of Chico dump, everything into one spot. We don't have a river to dump it into. They do. So, also, there's a lot of, like to me, there's a lot of opportunity to use the fire to our advantage of getting funding, using a lot of this affluent for green spaces through the Parks and Rec District, creating fire separations. There's a lot of things that can be done with that water once it's treated. I mean, you go play golf on most golf courses, it's treated with effluent. That's been treated. So
Yeah.
why can't we water all the way around town, et cetera? I know I'm not saying just put sprinklers everywhere, but there are systems designed to do that. You can design it that way.
I'd be glad to address that. In the 2020 study, and I don't want to go, all the way back
That's fine.
on the slides without, being a visual issue to look at the slides. But the 2020 study did look at those micro alternatives between land application, beneficial reuse, and surface water discharge. Beneficial reuse, I believe, anyone would say is the preferred alternative for everything you just described. In a cost-constrained project such as this one, not only with beneficial reuse is your treatment standard going to be higher, you're going to have to distribute it to a market that needs it and that wants to receive it and distribute it. The town of Paradise, will no longer have a golf course. We have very limited irrigation areas. But if there was a cost incentive for us to look at beneficial reuse and dispose of the water that way, that is something we would absolutely be interested in and was studied in the earlier version of the project.
And I'm not laying out something that you need to go this way, and this way. I'm just saying we need to look at those alternatives and look at what can be done to, for fire prevention, things like that. There's funding that can come in that direction too, that could be used towards the sewer. So I'm not saying that I have all the answers, I'm just asking, why are we not looking at this and instead spending, I mean, I have a feeling you know how much we've spent on all of this so far, and it's way more than $3 million bucks. So that's a lot of wasted money to me that should have been, these other things should have been looked at first. So,
Those options that you just described were looked at in the 2020 version of the project that set the charter for the course of the last 4 years, including an improved environmental document. Beneficial reuse, again, is a positive benefit. It is something we can absolutely look at again. And there's these revised 3 options. Let's say we find a treatment plant location at one of those 3 or somewhere else that we haven't thought of. Open to suggestions. And so if we want to distribute the water for beneficial reuse, that will increase our cost to treat it, and it'll increase our cost to get the water to where it needs to go. If there's funding that helps make that a cost neutral, cost advantageous, that is something we would absolutely want to do. You're right.
I believe there are plenty of alternatives, and I just don't want to see the town waste a bunch of money on stuff we can't use. So.
Well, and to be clear, the solution of going down to Chico was not our first choice.
I understand that.
And there was, they wanted regionalization, and basically, we wouldn't have been issued a permit, I don't believe, to do our own. And so that is the direction that we looked at, even though it was not our first choice.
We were led down the wrong path, yeah.
We were directed down the wrong path.
Directed down the wrong path.
Yes.
Now we've proven that it's not viable, so
And
now we have to look at a local solution.
After many, many
Back when we
millions.
were talking about a sewer, in '79, they recalled the council because of the sewer. But back when we were looking at the clustered wastewater system for just the Skyway corridor and picking up the high school, all of these concerns that came up in the 2020 study, were brought up, that we had the same concerns about what do you do with the water and in the wintertime and all that. So those are real deals, and having to treat it to where it can be reused to a higher level, yeah, there's more cost in that. But that was really the solution the town picked, and you all voted on, and we told everybody involved back then, the water board and everybody else, and we told them this time, we voted on that. We wanted to build our own, and we were led down this, or sent down this other path. But yeah, and even the 2020 study, we hire these consultants and people, right? So they're going to come and do, and you can crunch number, and sometimes, I don't know, sometimes you got to just believe your gut, do your own research, and find out what's real. Experts are fine, but, the clustered wastewater system is, you keep your septic tank, you might have a few pump stations to get the water into the feeder line to wherever you're going to treat it, and then go from there. And looking at the alternative treatment processes, maybe, I'm looking at this thing about the worm deal, there's some things, there's some solutions. Consultants that we've hired leading up to this point have not shared with us, because it's maybe not their expertise.
And I think it's worth recognizing that since the 2020 date, PRPD has really ramped up their green spaces around town. And so I think it's important, not only with regard to this context, but pretty much every one of our major projects, of being in close communication with the other stakeholders in the town so that we can learn how we can work together along the way rather than backtracking.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Next card, Melanie?
Cliff Jacobson.
I wish I had 30 minutes. Good afternoon, council members and mayor. I'm Cliff Jacobson, Paradise resident, and boy, I had a big old thing all written up here, but I think I can kind of summarize it. The worm farm from Biofiltro has been around for over 30 years. They treat an entire housing community in Chile. It's, I believe, 1 million gallons per day. They have the capability of treating anywhere from 1,000 gallons a day to 1.5 million, and and they do it with worms, and they do it for 90% less cost to run that system than a conventional wastewater treatment plant. And this gentleman that was up here before me said it perfectly. We never had a problem with the septic tanks. We still don't have a problem with them. They're fine. We have a problem with the leach fields. If we take away the septic and we put it all in one bundle and we have to send it down a hill, yeah, we got big lift stations. We got tons of horsepower. We got bigger lines. We got bigger everything. It's twice, 2, 3, 4 times the cost. But pumping out a septic tank every 1 or 2 times a year or every 3 or 4 years, depending on the usage, is not a big expense. And we already have a system in place for that. What we need is a way to get rid of our effluent after the tanks. So small lift station, going to a central location, and everything that you've laid out there is perfect. Just mini size it, don't get the big size. Put little pumps in, put little lines in. Run it all down the hill to the first pump station and make that empty property a large worm farm. Make it a tourist attraction. Use the water to landscape it, make a park. Tell the world that Paradise recovered, and look at our state-of-the-art wastewater system. We use worms to treat our waste, and we built a park around it, and everybody's gonna come and look at it. You're gonna get worm castings, they're worth money. You're gonna get red worms, excuse me. You're going to benefit tremendously from a system. These guys build systems for wineries in Napa, and Napa has the most stringent wastewater requirements in the state of California. And they meet and exceed them, and they've got them as small as 1,000 gallons a day, and they've got one that's 1,000,000 gallons a day at a large winery. And they're making it work. And they're making it work for a fraction of what everybody else is paying. We need to look at this as an alternative because it's leading edge, it's cutting edge technology. But it's been around for a long time. The worms have been eating our waste for millions of years. We just never figured out how to bring it into one location. And the way you've got this distribution set up, you could easily cut your costs by probably 30, 40, 50%, even more, and put this system to good use. You don't have any odor. It's state-of-the-art. It's the way to go. It really is.
Thanks, Cliff.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
Next card, Melanie.
Frederico Pumpin?
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, members of the council. Thank you for the time for speaking. I'm going to be brief. I think Cliff here just and the gentleman earlier said, I think, the right things. Like you can do this in a cheaper way, right? You don't need to treat all the solids. You can treat the septic. You can undersize the collection system, and then I think I would love to be a part of the solution with Biofiltro. The Biofiltro is basically harnessing the power of nature, just getting the right conditions in a media of wood chips and wood shavings that we can even take from the trees in here, and then treat the water in that way. This is a biological system. This is a natural system, and yeah, there's a lot of additional ways that this can grow. Tourism was something Cliff was saying. I think this is very interesting. Other counties are already looking at this. As we mentioned, we work very closely with Napa. We have a lot of systems already in place with complicated wastewater streams, and for sure we have septic plants here in the United States, but also elsewhere in the world, and they've proven their worth. They work. They're operationally simple, and they are cost competitive to any other alternative. So I just appreciate all the information you've given, and we are more than willing to work with you and share information so we can work together a better project for the town of Paradise. Thank you so much.
Sharing some money.
I have a couple of questions for you, if that's appropriate. Can you speak to the temperature extreme thresholds of the worms that are utilized in these systems?
Normally, as long as we're not irrigating them with hot water, we are okay. So we have systems in the desert, more than...
What about cold?
Cold is not a problem. We have systems in Washington, even in Antarctica. So
okay.
The worms go and hide in the media. So.
And what about, I understand after doing some research about redworms in particular, that they are selective in avoiding pathogens. And so how do you address the residual pathogens in the worm castings?
Normally here we use UV systems to treat the pathogens, but there's a lot of ways of treating this. You can use chlorination, and here Cliff, peroxylic acid told me this is another alternative. So yeah, there's...
Which still leaves the beneficial properties of the
Exactly.
worms in agricultural applications?
Yes.
Okay. And then lastly, in any of your domestic facilities, has there been any applicable funding that people have been able to utilize, or is it more of like a
Yeah,
fringe concept?
For now it's been private, and this is what I would like to tap into. We are working with some institutions and consulting firms that, through institutions are trying to get some funding for this kind of projects. But so far, it's all of it has been private efforts. So
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Mayor Crowder, 1 second. Melanie, sorry. I just want to take a moment to recap some history about the STEP systems, the septic tank effluent pumping. It is a different approach to the project, and it's certainly something within these three alternatives we can provide an update. There are pros and cons in the actual 2017 study. The STEP system was preferred, where the solids remain on private property and the tank remains, you don't have to abandon it, but every property gets a pump that has an electrical draw and pumps the effluent instead of it going to a leach field, which is a great benefit to our community. Instead of going to a leach field, which can fail and require more area and the soils become saturated, goes to our collection system, right? And the advantage of that is that you do have smaller pipes. You don't have to dig as deep, although it would be quite challenging in the shallow terrain of Paradise with our undergrounding of utilities. That is certainly something we can look at again. Again, there are pros and cons to STEP systems in these three alternatives. We can provide an update to that. But I did want to mention the community feedback from the 2017 study, and the desire to go forward with the STEP system was that how could you put in all of this effort and not have it be a complete project? We're still going to have a septic tank. We're still going to have to pump it less frequently, but it's still going to exist. And so that's one of the factors that went into the 2020 version of this project was we heard the community say they don't want a step project with septic tanks remaining in effluent-only treatment and dispersal. So we can absolutely look at that as we provide a high-level overview of these three alternatives moving forward, as I've heard it come up a few times just now.
Does a STEP system, is it cheaper to develop and deliver than the full-blown system?
Well,
Sounds like it would
it's going to be smaller pipes.
Right.
Again, it's going to have more property owner responsibility for maintenance. It's going to have energy, the whole system would be pressurized. It does have a potential benefit for being shallower. It can potentially reduce costs, but based on the terrain and topography and the utility situation in Paradise, the pros and cons of a STEP is not as easy of a decision as it was before, and we're glad to update you on that based on our findings.
I mean, part of our concern, of course, is we've got to design a system that we can afford, that we can find the money for, right?
Correct.
And so that's why I'm hearing these different options, and that's why I'm thinking, we want you to look at the different options and tell us one that can be built within the funding constraints that we live within.
Yep, I 100% agree. Thank you.
And I think maybe, if it's, as citizens too, I think we might have to learn to live within our means too. And, I get what you're saying, and I, that probably would be an ideal situation. But if you're going to spend $400 a month to not have to pump your whole everything down the hill or to a treatment plant, as opposed to 150 and having to pump every 3 years or whatever, maybe that's something, again, we'll all have to learn to live with.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Melanie.
When I was on the council, when we first developed the clustered wastewater system, I was not on the council in 2017, but up until 2016, I forget what year that we started talking about that. The biggest objection from the community was there were going to be, not every septic tank was going to need a pump to get the effluent into the service line. but some were. The biggest complaint that everybody had was, at that time, that system, was there was going to be this huge connection charge to help pay for it. And I know my seat on the council was one saying, if we're going to do this, you have to find the funding or the mechanism to where the people don't have to pay to have that pump put in. And that was what the town was willing to do, was to find that way to do it. So I don't know what study you guys did in 2017 to where everybody was concerned about a little electric bill or something. But what Mr. Martin said is absolutely true. We don't have a problem with septic tanks. We have a problem with leach fields. That's our problem. So that's what we should be looking. How can we eliminate leach fields in this town? That's the kind of sewer treatment system we need. How do we do that?
And before we go on to the next card, Mark, we're really not picking on you. We're looking for alternatives, and you've done a lot of work on this, and I know you have.
No, thank you.
And I appreciate it, and it's nothing personal, but I guess we're frustrated too, and you're kind of the venting board, and
That's okay.
It's not meant for that.
No,
So,
absolutely understand, and no, I appreciate the feedback. We share the same goals, truly.
Thank you. So, Melanie, next card.
Next card for John Ramaya.
Good evening, council. I'm a little confused. I thought that the agenda item in this section here was to accept the report, not get into the rest of the stuff. I have one question. Council very late got 800 pages. Has somebody went through the contract and looked at the contract and said, yes, they did this, yes, they did this, yes, they did this, and it's a complete report? Or, whether it's, there's a lot of questions, and I'm sure nobody had the time to read all 800 pages in, 4 days, 3 days? That's my question. And if there's a deficiency, we need to look at future contracts to make sure that that deficiency is corrected. I'll reserve my other comments till later. Thank you.
The item 1 says, consider concurring with staff's recommendation to accept the basis of design report. I'm expecting that when staff makes that recommendation, they've done exactly what the question that was asked, that you went through each line and you compared it to the contract, and that the staff is telling us that they believe that the contract was met. Is that a correct statement, or am I misspeaking there?
No, that's correct. Thank you.
Well, since I'm only on page 17 and there's 840 pages, I suggest we postpone this meeting. No, just joking, just.
Next card, Melanie.
Next card, Nathan Vale.
Good afternoon, council. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for your service and all the work that you've done to date. And please don't have any more meetings during the day. I apologize for coming and going. It's very difficult to be here when you do it during the workday. But I came specifically to talk about the potential sites for the wastewater treatment plant. And I came to ask you not to consider the Skyway plant or location. And the reason is, thank you for asking why. The reason is, I assume the reason we're putting in the septic is to draw business and to help our city grow, our town grow. And I support that 100%. I do support the septic. I support finding a site for it. But you'll do as much damage putting a big, fat, ugly plant right at the opening of our town as the good you did trying to get businesses here. I can't even believe, honestly, that that's a consideration, to put a plant right there at the opening of our town. Also, quite separately, so I own 4 properties in Paradise. I also own 2 properties in the Blue Oak Terrace neighborhood. I happen to serve on the water board there, and I can tell you that you will find significant resistance if you put a waste treatment plant right on top of our well water. And I forgot to mention before, but with the town itself, I can also assure you that I think the entire town will combine against you if you try to put a treatment plant right at the opening of our town. It's ugly, it's not going to be comely, and I don't know what it's going to look like, and I don't care. I don't think it should be there. And so, Steve, why are you looking at me like that?
Because I have actually seen pictures, I think Mark can kind of address that as far as, and no determination by maybe where it's going. But it can also look like a park in today's day and age too, without looking at it like an ugly sewer treatment plant. So just.
Well, it could be, and I've seen many of them myself, and they're ugly. So maybe there's something I haven't seen. But I can tell you that as I've lived here since 2000, a quarter of a century almost. I love this town. When my house burnt down, there was no consideration to go anywhere else. This is our town. We love it here. But we will mount resistance against building a plant right at the opening gates. And so I would ask you, as a friend and as a fellow Paradisian, not in a contentious way, but as a friend, to not put the plant right at the opening gate of our beautiful town.
One of the things, we don't own that land. We don't own that land that Walmart was going to go on. So we don't own any land to put this thing on. So land acquisition is a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, well, the gentleman before me was right. This isn't even the issue. The reason I'm here today is to preempt the issue, because after you do what you'll probably do today, which is to accept what's been done and move on to what's next, we just want you to know that as you move on to what's next, we're going to be here to resist it. And so, and like I say, not in a contentious way. We're grateful for all of you for being on the council and the town management as well. This has not been easy, but we would really ask you to not consider that site.
I don't think any of us on the council would want to have the old-fashioned waste treatment plants as you come into town that has the big tanks with the things spinning around that smells real bad and all that. I don't see any of my fellow council members, maybe I'm speaking out of school, but I don't see them advocating for that. I'm just happening to look at one of these new things. This guy right here, that's what it looks like. You got little pipes coming out of the ground, you got sprinklers, and that's it. That's all you'd see. And then, like we've said earlier, it could be a park. There's new technology out there that has replaced that old treatment plant that smells bad.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves because we don't even know.
Yes.
So my objection is noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
William Shario.
So I'm William Sherritt, Bill Sherritt, here for two reasons, one school board, one personal. Been a resident since 1974. I've talked to you before on this stuff too. As far as school board is concerned, it was mentioned earlier, we're not waiting for this to happen. It's going to be far too in the future. So 2031, we're going to start building Paradise Elementary School in May. And that's the last big school we're going to build for now. So we bought property around about 7 acres around Paradise High School to put future leach fields in. We can't afford to wait for you guys to do this stuff, so we're trying to take care of our own situation. So that's that. I think the time frame to get this done is ridiculous. Of 2031, fire happened in 2018. Things are supposed to be happening in 2020. I've mentioned that before. I think you guys need to expedite everything. I only have 3 minutes, so I won't go too far with that. One thing you guys need to realize is there's been a fire in Southern California. Material costs are going to escalate again, just like they did here. So we can look at the state of California paying more for everything again. And we're in the same boat you guys are in the district. That's why we're moving forward on everything we do as quick as we can. One thing that you guys have to take into consideration too is if you're doing 2 plants, you guys mentioned how much is that plant going to cost us on Skyway. You need to double that if you're going to do the one on Clark Road, just a note. Another thing, you're stymieing businesses in this town. I was a businessman in this town for 45 years. The businesses are not coming to this town, which you guys know, and the longer you take, the longer it's going to happen. That's also shortens your revenues at the same time. Also feel that it's kind of I don't own any property right now except on my residence, so it's not my situation. But if you guys decide to do Skyway and you leave Clark alone for 10 years, that property on Skyway is going to have a lot larger value to our commercial people. Property owners on Clark Road are going to have to wait another 10 years until you guys do sewer on that property. That's very unfair to those property owners. If I was one of those owners, I'd be here every second. Speaking of school board, I have to get to that. I have one at 5:30 tonight. So you guys had mentioned that maybe you would put some citizens on this ad hoc committee. I would love to be on it. And again, I mentioned that you guys aren't going to want me to be on it because I'm one of those that doesn't hurry up and wait. I want action done, and I do it as reasonable as possible. So I won't be able to stay past 5 o'clock if you guys do decide to put somebody on that board, but I would be more than welcome to be on that.
And I understand what you're saying. We're frustrated too, and it's not that we're sitting here not trying to do things. If you've got a check for $400 million, we can move forward right now.
You know that's not an appropriate
No,
question to ask me in the first place.
but what I'm saying.
You know you can't ask me that.
Building this system is not like building a school. Building a school, you're building a school on your property. You're not going through other jurisdictions. You're not going underneath.
Okay, I didn't bring any of that up at what I brought up today. I'm well aware of that. I'm like I said, I've been a businessman. I know how all that stuff works. I don't appreciate that comeback at all to me, to be honest with you. But everybody has their hurdles to jump. Okay, we've jumped our hurdles. We spent, when I get done with this one, we'll spend over $200 million to do our schools in Paradise and Magalia. Okay, so we've done our hurdles. It's, I didn't bring up any of that. So
We don't have the funds, Bill, and that's what we're looking for. And so this started at a $177 million project.
I am aware of that.
And now is somehow at 450.
Okay, I'm not going to take your lecture of how that works. I know how it works.
Okay.
Okay? So, if you want some help with it, I'd be more than happy to help you with it. Okay?
Thank you. Cars Mill anymore?
Doug Mindrar.
Okay. Thank you, boy. I appreciate your time. Engineers, I appreciate the effort that you do. Appreciate yours for trying. We're definitely, the budget's over. And the problem I haven't seen the 800 pages. I don't think everybody else here, from what I've gathered, has had the chance to read it. So part of this meeting, if that's the case, is probably a little ahead of its time because you really haven't been able to ascertain what they've done properly. I questioned some of what they were asked. In doing this report, knowing the fact we went through a fire, you're going to be years in advance of trying to get enough people here to justify the cost of it, unless the government pays. I've heard several things go on, knowing in 2017 that Paradise, the town was going to possibly have to pay for part of the cost and the public. Well, it doesn't matter if the town has to pay for it. That means the citizens are paying for it because you're going to still have to tax them and come up with it. On the other hand, the gentleman back there that's concerned about the looks of a sewer plant, I grant, I don't want a concrete sewer plant. I hate to tell him, for the last 30 years I've looked at probably hundreds of hours of times with multiple different engineering firms that have designed beautiful systems, downtown cities that they take it in their skyscrapers, run the same water through it down into a landscape area, ponds for their fish, and they're reusing the water back for themselves. So there's lots of alternatives out there, not necessarily everybody having to worry about what's in their backyard. We are in a unique situation on this ridge. We live on soil that's on lava cap, that if you don't use it at some point, it's coming out of the ground and still going into our water system. So, and eventually, we're going to use up and filter out a certain portion. There are alternatives, as they're saying, with their worm farms that can give us purification. They can be built, landscaped, put in properly. There are alternatives, and I think even what they designed, we should have been looking at the fact that we should have done a smaller system on a design basis of what we could add to, not necessarily trying to put a whole system in on a time basis of what we couldn't afford. I think at the time, being that they were asked, I think it should have been presented, hey, we've got X amount of dollars, can we build within that range, and can we add on it with a reasonable cost? When I hear we've got 32 pump stations, we got multiple other stations, has they been addressed as far as the electrical and the power system to even supply this and what the cost is going to be to us with our PG&E costs going up so dramatically all the time. That means we also need to look at an alternative in the solar or whatever to maybe offset costs, and can we do it? Now, if we go to a gravity or smaller systems, because Paradise has got a unique deal.
Okay, we're out of time now, but
Okay,
thank
we could go down each ridge and put a smaller plant at the end of each ridge and stay away from a lot of the pump systems.
Thank you.
My last card is for Robert Bean.
Good afternoon, Council. Thank you very much for your time and consideration in regards to this matter. It is a community matter, and Mr. Maddox and your team, thank you for your presentation. I guess it comes down to stakeholder inclusiveness. PID, Cal Water. Our water system's already stressed out under current conditions in regard, just look at the overlay tables for the hydrants. Has anybody communicated with PID in regards to upgrading their contribution to the effluent needs? I'll just read out my bullet points and you guys can address them accordingly. Hydrant demands. Has there been an effort, a collaborative effort? Hydro agreements with PID and Cal Water. Effect on supply and the systems. Hydro requirements into the future. Hydro demands, has there been an effort for collaborative agreements? Impact on PID, limited resources, air quality and control, catastrophe planning, earthquake, slides, etc. Subsequent alternative scenarios to mitigate interruption of sewage disposal should a catastrophe interrupt disbursement. Does this project require the effluent to be infused with additional hydro needs? Again, PID, Cal Water, stakeholders. It's been alluded that this project will affect zoning and land usage. My family trust owns 17 going in 19 and 20 properties in the Skyway corridor from here down to the crossroads. So we're pretty much significant stakeholder in all this. Inclusiveness, I guess that wouldn't matter. The slide model zoning changes. What are those changes and how can we interpret them into the future without sitting and waiting and guessing? Why isn't the PID taking lead agency on this? hydro for hydro. Kind of makes sense. Establish a steering committee. Have we dedicated a community-based collaboration with the town council and the additional stakeholders to establish a body that can guide us through this process? Again, Mr. Maddox has done a marvelous job.
Thank you.
But there's
That's
other
time.
I have taxpayers, so give me about 2
You
minutes.
you had 3 minutes, that's all we've got.
Sounds
So
like the
please,
project will be
please stop.
punitive for the property owners.
Please stop. Thank you.
I have no more cards.
Okay.
Hey, Woody.
My wife's checking.
Okay. So, back to,
People want to talk.
hey, you're not here anymore.
No, I'm here from PID.
Get to the microphone.
I'm trying to.
Who are you?
Kevin Phillips, thank you. Very familiar with this project. I just want to say from PID standpoint that we know this is a keystone project. We understand the complexities behind it, and we're just here to say we support this project moving forward. We'd like to partner with the town on advocacy, on ways to look for funding, and also ways for us to be part maybe of help with the operations. We are very familiar with undergrounding, with treatment, with an NPDES permit, which it appears that you guys are going to have to get. So we just want to be here to help support and know that this project is very important to the town's recovery, and we want to be part of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. No more cards? No more? Okay. So we're back to the item two. Yes, do I hear a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the basis of design report that was prepared by Corolla Engineers and concur with the staff's recommendation on the project. Do it in pieces.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do we have,
We're just doing it under one, or what?
I'll do one at a time.
we're doing one here.
I made a motion. Is there a second?
So we're just accepting the report
Yes.
as submitted, which means they did their work.
Right. They
That
did
we
what
asked them to
they
do.
were contracted
All right,
to
I'll
do.
second that.
Motion by Lassonde, seconded by Culleton. Councilmember Bolin is absent. Councilmember Culleton? Councilmember Culleton?
Oh, that's me?
Yeah.
Aye.
Councilmember Lang?
Aye.
Councilmember Lassonde?
Aye.
And Mayor Crowder?
Aye.
Motion passes.
So, item 2, provide staff direction on projects, next steps, and I think Mark's gotten,
You've gotten an earful, haven't you,
Yeah.
Mark?
I have. I understand the project direction and feedback that I've received from the council, and that's certainly something we can do. A lot of the studies and reevaluation of past alternatives will require time, but we will come up with a plan. If you do approve item 2, we will come up with a plan to present those project fact sheets, as well as some of the what I would describe as micro alternatives amongst them, and then present a fuller picture for you to understand about the timing and effort required to really address everything that was discussed today. But yes, that is something we
What
can
is
do.
micro alternatives?
I mean, for example, if you were to look at each of those alternatives, treatment type, treatment location, treatment or dispersal method, and so with step versus non-step, worms, versus non-worms, and, those other project alternatives that were requested, to come back. What I'm trying to articulate here is there is a lot of effort ahead of us to get there, and we will go as swiftly as possible to do that.
Now, is this existing contract with our design review team? This is work this is the direction you're getting, you'll give them that direction, they'll go help. figure
Yes,
all this stuff out.
that is what's nice, and I know we still have one more agenda item to do relating to the contract with our owner's agent, HDR. But within these contracts, we have the flexibility to issue contract amendments, if that authority is granted, to direct work as we go forward, whether, to pivot to this direction. We have confirmed, sorry, one last point, we have confirmed with our funding agencies, we've received grants to fund the design portion or this phase of the project, and that they stand behind the project, HCD, with our CDBG-DR funds, that as we pivot, that they stand by us, and these project funds that were originally allocated towards the regionalization can continue to be used to advance this new version. So we're really grateful for that.
But this has all been, originally we're given the money and the direction was all to go design a project that would take it, regionalized sewer treatment thing, take it to Chico. We're giving direction now, look at alternatives. We're not looking at sending necessarily solids, or look at leach field replacement, look at worm stuff. Is that still going to get the funding?
Yes.
Because, they were looking at creating this standard old-fashioned, this is how you do it, pump all the stuff down the hill. Whether it's locally in town or down to Chico, we're talking about maybe look at some other options.
Yeah, so we have the flexibility within our contract with HDR and our owner's agent to give direction. Like I mentioned last week, I believe, they are an extension of staff. They represent the town. They undertake the vision gathered here and follow direction that we issue for them to do. So they will play the key role in this kind of renewed alternatives analysis phase before we kick off whatever's next to continue designing the project.
One of the key things that has to be done through this next phase, though, is almost a design to cost. We cannot have another big cost that we can't get funding for. So you've got to be able to estimate what's the reasonable amount of funding we can get, and the designs that you bring that back to us has got to say, we think it'll cost about this much, and we think we can get this much, and they have to be close.
Yep.
I want them to look at this and see whether or not it's viable.
Understood.
And that's something that could be done pretty quickly.
Understood.
Right?
Yeah, thank you.
That is one of my questions is, so of the options that they're going to drill down to whatever extent, are they just going to look at options, other alternatives, or do we need to identify those? Like specifically like Woody saying, look at the worm one, or maybe look at whatever Mount Shasta just put in,
exactly.
or maybe Almanor?
Yep. I've heard from the council and the community that there's a desire to look at every and all option that delivers a sewer project. So we will do that. We will take a step back out from traditional, just those three alternatives with a standard wastewater treatment plant with surface water discharge, and see what else is out there and report back.
And we'll get that report like, all right, here, we've looked at 100 things, here's 10 things that make sense, or 5 or 2, before they spend all of this drilling down and drawing these,
Yep,
designing
so-
pump stations if we don't even know which one we're going to do.
The challenge is the level of effort to provide you enough information to help you make an informed decision. So we could spend easily a year I know. And so I heard, direction, time is of the essence to deliver this project. That's not lost on us. We want to present informed, I don't know how else to say it. We want to present the information you're requesting as quickly as possible, but it will take some time.
It's going to be a general thing.
Yes.
With
Well-
this many because
I see us getting information back and making a decision at another future council
And then
meeting.
go direct on to.
Then go
Yes.
direct.
Yes.
Okay.
So are you comfortable with with that, Mark?
I am comfortable. I feel like I have enough staff direction. I don't know if that's a vote or not, but I have information.
So it's a consensus, not a vote. So are we all good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so item 3 is appoint 2 council members to serve on ad hoc committee. I've been on that committee since day one, and then some. And right now, I am the current as is Heidi. So I would like to make a motion, if it pleases the council, that Heidi.
Well, wait a minute, Steve, you've been on that committee since day one, and now we're up to $4 million. I'm not sure we can afford you being on that committee. Just kidding.
I'm giving you your money's worth, Woody.
Oh, it's getting late.
I feel good. I'm comfortable with that.
I'm okay with that,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so, we,
I would like to clarify where it says project team will report more frequently. So I would, or I'm sorry, where it says staff to meet at irregular intervals with the 2 council members, I would like to be included in all updates and communications.
That purpose of that language is to just acknowledge that as the committee is formed, staff will work with the committee to set this up that meets your expectations.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
and I do want to make sure, because we have, I don't think we've had the correspondence that we needed to in the other, because basically, once we were done with Chico, we haven't done anything. I think we need to be more involved so we do know what's going on and we can report to council too.
I would encourage you to go ahead and do a motion to formally appoint the 2 ad hoc committee members.
I so move.
I'm so seconded.
Motion and seconded.
Motion by
Okay.
Lassonde, seconded by Colleton. Councilmember Bolin is absent. Councilmember Colleton?
Aye.
Councilmember Lang?
Aye.
Councilmember Lassonde?
Aye.
And Mayor Crowder?
Aye.
Thank you, council.
Okay. So, but we're not done yet. Item 2B, consider concurring with staff's recommendation to allow Paradise Town Manager to approve amendments to the current master services agreement with HDR so long as the amendment does not affect the overall budget that was originally approved and the overall intent of the master services agreement.
Yep.
So,
I'd be glad to give a quick background on this item. This is an item that was moved from last week, but again is copied here for reference, and I'll just summarize that the Town of Paradise awarded a contract with HDR for a not-to-exceed amount of $5 million. We have secured 100% funding for this contract and are appreciative of HDR's efforts to advance the project. This is a contract cleanup item, but we also acknowledge the desire of the council to hear this more broadly in the lens of what we just accomplished here in the special meeting. And so with that, we are asking council to adopt a revised resolution that delegates the authority to the town manager to execute individual task orders. This is a great segue and example of what we just discussed, the work that is required ahead for us to perform the alternatives analysis, to evaluate everything that we just discussed is going to require a task order issued to HDR. And so with that, if you approve this resolution and this action item before you, that authority would be able to be achieved by the direction of the town manager. And so with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions the council might have.
So if we don't do that, who are you the person talking to HDR or what?
No, if we don't do anything as far as this language, that every single task order would have to come back to the full council at the regular interval or special meetings like this.
Is it an option for these task orders to go before the town manager and the sewer ad hoc committee members so that there's a little bit broader accountability and transparency?
Yeah, I'll defer to the town attorney on that. I've certainly never experienced routing contract amendments or task orders through an ad hoc committee.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, that's possible. What you would do is you would still approve what's here in front of you, because ultimately the authority would be granted to the town manager. But you can add in a step saying it should be presented to the ad hoc committee beforehand.
Should be?
Well, yeah, I mean, the short answer is if you have less than a majority of the council, you have to delegate the authority to someone else. And so you can direct them, look, bring it to the ad hoc committee first for review. That's not a problem, but ultimately, it wouldn't change necessarily what's here, but you'd be adding in a step saying we want the ad hoc committee to see it first.
And be able to give their recommendations as to whether he proceeds with those changes?
Sure.
Because like I expressed at the last meeting, I'm not comfortable, given the history of this project, to reduce accountability or oversight, because we're, back at square one, and that's all transpired under the current town manager and HDR, and so we clearly need to add additional things. Since this contract was awarded, that has been under your tenure.
Yeah, that can certainly be, one of the things that the council, implements as part of this process.
Just quick clarification, just to make sure it is clear that if you, as a committee, don't agree, then we will bring it back to the full council, so.
I think what it is I think we just individually and probably collectively, it's our job to set policy, so we set policy. And like we're getting a lot of feedback on policy we set last month or this month on this Pioneer Electric thing. People are starting to holler about that. I think it's just we want to be involved in the conversation, not at the last minute with an 800-page report 3 days before a council meeting, I think that's what the purpose is. So I'll make a motion that we adopt this with that addition, or what did I say it, Scott?
Just with the direction.
With the direction that the sewer committee, ad hoc committee review it first, or is that right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's my motion.
I'll second it.
Motion by Colleton, seconded by Lasson. Councilmember Bolin is absent. Councilmember Colleton?
Aye.
Councilmember Lang?
Aye.
Councilmember Lasson?
Aye.
And Mayor Crowder?
And before I do, I just want to make one thing that means that we have to make ourselves available so we don't slow the process down. And with that being said, aye.
Motion passes.
So with that, we're going to adjourn this meeting. We're going to take a 5-minute break and go into closed session.